Hey there, history lovers and faith explorers. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and inspiring stories in all of ancient history. The story of Daniel, the man who stood firm when the whole world tried to break him. This isn't just another old tale. It's a story of courage, conviction, and divine power that still echoes thousands of years later. So grab your seat, because this is not just history. This is faith in action. Picture this. The mighty city of Jerusalem, its golden walls gleaming in the sun. But the peace is shattered. Babylon, the superpower of the age, invades. King Nebuchadnezzar's army storms through the city, tearing down everything in its path. Temples burn, the sound of clashing metal fills the air, and the people of Judah are taken captive. Among those exiles is a young man, Daniel. Probably no older than 17. He's intelligent, disciplined, and full of faith. He's taken from everything he knows, his home, his language, his temple, and dragged nearly 1,000 miles to Babylon, a world ruled by idols, wealth, and power. Now imagine that moment. You've lost your homeland. You're standing in front of the most powerful king on earth. And that king decides to train you to serve him. He changes your name, your clothes, even your diet, trying to erase your identity and replace it with his. But Daniel, he refuses to forget who he is. Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, you probably know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are chosen to serve in the royal court. They're given the king's finest food and wine, but here's the problem. It goes against God's commands. So Daniel speaks up, respectfully but boldly. He tells the chief official, "We can't eat this. Give us only vegetables and water for 10 days. Test us. See if we look any worse." Now that's risky. He could have been executed on the spot for refusing the king's order. But Daniel's faith wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. 10 days later, the official checks on them. And what he sees is shocking. Daniel and his friends look healthier, stronger, and sharper than all the others. Their obedience doesn't weaken them. It sets them apart. And from that moment, Daniel begins to rise. Time passes. King Nebuchadnezzar starts having nightmares, strange, vivid dreams that leave him terrified. None of his magicians or wise men can explain them. So he snaps. He orders that all the wise men in Babylon, including Daniel, be killed. When Daniel hears this, he doesn't panic. He gathers his friends and says, "Let's pray. God will reveal the meaning." That night, while Daniel sleeps, God gives him the dream and its interpretation. The next morning, Daniel stands before the most powerful man in the world and calmly says, "Your Majesty, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." He describes the dream, a giant statue made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay, and explains that each metal represents a kingdom that will rise and fall. But in the end, God will establish a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar is stunned. The dream is exactly right. He falls to the ground, declaring, "Surely your God is the God of gods." And just like that, Daniel goes from a captive to the chief advisor of Babylon. Now, Daniel's story intertwines with his three friends, and their test is just as legendary. Nebuchadnezzar builds a massive golden statue and commands everyone to bow before it. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse. They know there's only one true God. The king rages, orders a furnace heated 7 times hotter, and demands they bow or burn. Their answer? One of the boldest lines in history. "Our God is able to deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow." They're thrown into the flames. The fire is so hot it kills the soldiers nearby. But when the king peers into the furnace, his eyes widen. "Didn't we throw 3 men in there? I see 4, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." God himself is in the fire with them. When they come out, their clothes aren't even scorched. Not a single hair singed. The smell of smoke isn't on them. The king falls to his knees. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Once again, faith changes the empire. Years pass. Nebuchadnezzar dies. New kings rise. Babylon's throne changes hands, but Daniel remains, wiser, older, still faithful. Then comes King Belshazzar, a proud and arrogant ruler. One night, during a drunken feast, he commits a fatal mistake. He drinks wine from the sacred cups taken from God's temple in Jerusalem, mocking the Almighty. Suddenly, the room goes silent. A mysterious hand appears out of thin air and begins writing glowing words on the palace wall. Everyone freezes. The king turns pale. The words burn like fire. Emiani, Emiani, Tekel, Parson. No one can explain it, until Daniel is called. He stands before the trembling king and says, "You've been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians." That very night, the prophecy comes true. Babylon falls. The kingdom of Persia takes over. And Daniel, once again, survives the fall of an empire. Under the new king, Darius, Daniel's wisdom earns him a high position. So high that jealous officials start plotting against him. They can't find any fault in his work or his character. So they target his faith. They convince the king to sign a law that for 30 days, no one can pray to any god or man except the king. The punishment? Death by lions. Daniel hears the decree. And what does he do? He walks straight home, opens his windows toward Jerusalem, and prays, just as he always has. He knows the cost. He knows he's being watched. But his loyalty to God is stronger than fear. The officials catch him and rush to the king. Darius is devastated. He realizes he's been tricked, but he can't change the law. That evening, Daniel is thrown into a den filled with hungry lions. The stone is rolled across the entrance. The king spends the night pacing, unable to sleep. At dawn, he runs to the den and calls out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to rescue you from the lions?" And then, from the darkness, a voice answers, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not harmed me." Darius is overwhelmed. He orders Daniel lifted out, and not a single scratch is found on him. The king then issues a decree throughout the empire. "I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and his kingdom will never be destroyed." Faith once again changes the course of nations. Daniel's story doesn't end in the lion's den. In his later years, God gives him visions, glimpses into the future of empires and the coming of the Messiah. He sees kingdoms rise and fall, wars and rulers, and the ultimate victory of God's everlasting kingdom. These visions, mysterious and awe-inspiring, remind Daniel that even when the world feels out of control, God is still writing the story. Through all the chaos, through Babylon, through Persia, through betrayal and danger, Daniel never stopped praying. He never compromised his faith. He didn't just survive, he thrived. Because his strength wasn't from politics or power or position. It came from prayer. From a deep, unshakable trust in the God who had been with him from Jerusalem to Babylon to the lion's den. Daniel's life is a masterclass in faith under pressure. He didn't wait for perfect circumstances to obey. He obeyed right where he was. When everyone bowed, he stood. When the law said, "Be silent," he prayed louder. When the lions roared, he rested in God's peace. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing faith in the middle of it. Think about it. Daniel could have blended in. He could have prayed in secret. He could have chosen comfort over conviction. But he didn't. Because he knew who he belonged to. He believed that the God who created the stars could also shut the mouths of lions. Even now, centuries later, Daniel's story still speaks to us. It tells us that faith can thrive in the darkest places. That integrity matters more than power. And that prayer can open doors no kingdom can close. Maybe you're facing your own Babylon, a place that tests who you are and what you believe. Maybe the world around you is trying to shape you, pressure you, or silence your convictions. Daniel's life reminds us, you don't have to bow to the world to stand for God. Because when you stand for him, he stands with you. So, that's the story of Daniel, the young exile who became one of the greatest men of faith in history. From the palace to the pit, from prayer to prophecy, Daniel's life is proof that true power doesn't come from crowns or kingdoms. It comes from courage, character, and conviction. If you enjoyed this journey through the life of Daniel, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment below, and let me know. Would you have had Daniel's courage to keep praying, even if it meant facing the lions? Until next time, keep your faith strong, your spirit steady, and remember, the same God who shut the mouths of lions still stands beside those who trust him today. See you soon, my friends.